60% plus of Fortune 500 companies, right, have at least one KeyShot Studio license. Why? Yes, cool images, awesome, but we can do better. We can take a look and start out with the advantage of 3D rendering in general, because it turns out there's obviously a business use case. We already kind of got a sneak peek from the first presentation from Porsche, which actually beautifully slots in with what I'm going to say. So I think that's awesome. That's a total, I shouldn't say coincidence, because it's based on us understanding customers and you guys having kind of the perspective of, from our world, a customer, of course, right? Maybe you have, I think, some licenses, but you and your team aren't using us, I know. But what I'm trying to say is that it all tells one big story, right, of basically getting to a digital twin, and that's what we're going to end up with. So let's get started. And let's look at another company, this time an actual full-on customer, Speedo, that you all know of, right? So they gave us this wonderful breakdown of their numbers here. And that's all having to do with their pipeline. You already mentioned it, like in product design, big pipeline, right? Ideas come up. There's a need from the market. There's like user feedback. Hey, the last year's like diving goggles were, not great. We need to change it up, right? So there's some kind of input beginning of the pipeline. And then product design happens. And it happens in all of these like complicated steps, right? It's not just, I say pipeline, but it's not actually a straight line. It goes in this way, and then you find out, no, this wasn't the way to go. Then it goes in another way, and no, actually the first way was better. So you go back to that first way and develop in another direction. All kinds of milestones along the way, essentially designers checking in with their stakeholders, their management, whoever, the board, as you mentioned, saying, no, back to the drawing board, and until you get it right. So could be 50 variations for a new product, could be 100, could be whatever. So in that process, super crucial to be able to communicate. In the end, it's about communication, right? You have ideas, you put them in CAD, and then you need to tell your stakeholders what it is that you're thinking. Right, visually communicate. So here is where visualization, where 3D rendering comes in, as opposed to producing physical prototypes, which is where most of these companies, including Speedo, have traditionally come from. So yes, they ordered a prototype from a factory overseas, waited around, got it back, right, waited for the deliveries, and then unpacked it, and immediately like, this isn't gonna cut it, right? So rinse and repeat for all those, let's say 50 variations until they have something that works. This is where introducing 3D rendering, where you, let's say in a couple of minutes, maybe in a couple of hours, depending on your ambitions, but where you get an image right then and there, right? This is where they saved 4 months in a typical product cycle, in a product design cycle, just by being able to render. Same thing with tooling costs. No need to actually produce all these physical products, these samplers, these prototypes anymore. So essentially, in a perfect world, you only either produce a final prototype when all the digital process has been done, because then you're really sure that this is what you want and you're kind of just double checking. Or if you think one step further, if you fully trust the digital, depending on the industry, you could even go ahead and say, we really only produce when it's time to ship, right? That will be the extreme. Like you're doing it all in the digital world and then only producing the goods that you're actually going to sell. That will be 100%, efficiency in terms of the tooling, right? But they cut it down by 70%. And then, and I love that slide from you, Victor, I think it was when you said communication after product design. We say marketing, but yeah. In marketing, that's a whole nother side, right? Once a product has been designed and you know from the board, from the stakeholders, this is what it's going to be like, you can't just sell it. You need to market it, right? There needs to be content for that as well. So traditionally, you had all these physical prototypes. Well, you hired photographers and videographers and spent a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money on producing all of that content in the physical world. There's more to say about that. The complexity of these photo shoots, I think, is misunderstood. It's not as simple as just taking a couple of pictures. There's a lot to it. Environments, like getting the right location, scouting for locations, scouting models. I mean, it's crazy what you need to do for that. Well, guess what? If you're already using 3D in the product design process, why not just use it for marketing as well? We have the ability with ray tracing and modern technology to totally also make renderings, as you just saw, which was all marketing content that was in that video, to actually also market that. So when I said you can shift the physical production to the very end, I was including the marketing segment, right? Because you could also do it halfway. Design digitally and then produce the real like prototype, then take that to a photographer. But in our vision and in Speedo's like workflow, they can also skip that. They can market virtually as well. Super exciting and a huge bonus or a huge basically benefit they have over their competition. Here's another customer, and I don't know how many of you know Razer. I don't need to see your hands for this one, but it's a company in the US that make mobility toys, right? Really cool stuff, really popular in the US, not so much in Europe. Well, they really have a great story from Derek Moreno, the product designer, with using KeyShot, because they were able to really highlight the flexibility you get as well with like last-minute changes and basically the stuff you never want to have happen while you're making a new product, but that we all know happens all the time, right? So they needed to update a part really late in the product cycle. They were already marketing, and then they found this, oopsie, there was an issue with the rear fender. Yeah. Were they not on 3D and they didn't use 3D rendering for their workflow, weren't they in the digital world? They would have had to start over, right? Stop the ongoing photo shoots for the product because it's the wrong product. We cannot put the wrong product into a marketing material, obviously, right? So in this case, they made a change. By the way, we can go down to the low level. They made a change in their CAD application, right? That automatically live links into KeyShot Studio. So you literally open the file and it just populates the new version and they hit render again. And because they have studios, which is a feature that kind of stores different angles and configurations, basically your variation management, they really just had to click the button to just execute that again. Let it run for a night, and there you go. Here's all your new material with the latest changes included. And it's guaranteed to not include any of the old stuff either, which is like typical that you miss one of those angles if you take photos, right? Or the lighting isn't exactly the same anymore, stuff like that. So really, really important. We can also take a step back. Now, we've looked at some of those customers, but we can take a step back and show you some numbers that we found in general. And that is extremely impactful again, right? Across users, across companies, 44% are more likely to add an item to their cart, 40% increase in conversion rates, 30% increase in sales price, and minus 22%, so it's a decrease in returns. How does that make sense? Why does 3D produce these amazing results? Well, I've just made a big point of saying just how difficult it is to create all these like marketing material, all these, basically what the end customer is going to see and which influences their purchase decision. I hope some of you have made the same experience as me. When I go to Amazon, for example, just to take something relatable, and find like let's say a Bluetooth speaker, right? You know how many variations products have these days, right? You can get it in like 2 watts, 10 watts, 50 watts, 100 watts, right? Different sizes, for example. You can get it in different colors. All of that multiplies and means there's many variations. So when I go and buy like something cheap on, for example, Amazon, I sometimes see that what they're doing is they certainly didn't have the budget or the ability to produce like photos for all of those different variations. So they do it with like a black speaker and then they Photoshop in the different colors. Yeah, okay, I'm seeing some smiles and some nods. I think some people recognize what I'm saying here. I hate that. Like as a purchaser, I'm really drawn away from buying something that looks like it was Photoshopped because they really couldn't be bothered to show me the actual article variation I am trying to buy, right? So this is how we see these numbers and where we see them from. Okay, so that was a little bit on general 3D rendering advantages. And at this point, I want to close in a little bit more on what we call the digital twin concept that was also in Porsche's presentation, and we also heard before a couple times. This is really interesting for us because this is where we start to talk about specifically like scanned real life materials, right? You can think of those as digital twins. We've heard that as well, but we see the entire product, including with those materials applied as a digital twin, because that's in the end what our customers are selling, right? So that's how that works. But so when we see, for example, a bicycle with an AxF material applied, we see the entire thing, as I said, as one digital twin. And it's really important to say here, sometimes there is a kind of BS aspect to these terms. They're very hype. think blockchain, think large language model. And I think what's really important here is there's meat to the bone to this. I think we all know this, but I just want to make extra sure to say this is typically, sometimes people say it's just a 3D model, right? But it's really important that, and I think it showed very beautifully also from what you were showing at Porsche, that like it is crucial that this is super close to real life. Your whole calibration process in the first slides, I mean, you underwent all of that effort to make sure that you are looking, in my words, at a digital twin, not just at a 3D model of a cool Porsche car you could have had in the 90s, basically, with some cool colors on it. That's not the idea. You need the actual copy, or twin, I should say, of the real thing. The way it looks, the way the materials interact with light, all of that. That's why we're scanning. That's why we're going to such detail with this whole process. Because only if we have a real, reliable digital twin can we actually like collect the actual value of this whole idea, right? Because your stakeholders, and I mean, you said it directly, right? Your board and so on, they cannot make decisions based on the digital if that's not accurate. If that's just, oh, it looked kind of flashy and cool, so I put on some colors. That's not even, we don't even need to talk about. There's no value there, right? So that's the core thought that I have and that we have and that we see real value. And, customers, I mean, Speedo, Razer, and surprise, Philips as well. They're doing this already. So if you need any extra motivation to say, well, digital twin is not just an empty hype word, it is actual meat on the bone, then you can just look at these renderings done in KeyShot with AxF materials, of course, right? So close to truth that you can totally use them and make your decisions on them, make your marketing material on them, save a ton of money, save a ton of time, and everybody wins. So that is the important concept here. I also want to mention something else that I also think is really important. Here's our project, you can see labeled as KeyShot. This is an internal project we did for own kind of eating our own dog food, as we say. A helmet for an imaginary company, produced as a digital twin. So we started out with sketches, brought them into CAD, brought them into our software, KeyShot Studio, rendered the thing out, and then said, now we're going to produce it, right? We didn't actually produce it, that would have been too much. But this is a digital twin of a helmet, right, with exact measured materials. What can you then really do with it? I mean, we talked about renderings, right? Obviously, you can do animations. We saw those as well in the intro video. But there's actually way more once you are there. And that's really important. We go over to the output side, like what comes out of a digital twin. Well, you can, and this is really a video here. I'll try my luck and play it. So you can bring it into AR and VR, right? Super important. We have support for that. This is the helmet right in front of you. Why is that important? Well, in some cases, you had a huge display, right? Some cases, you need to see the real scale of objects to get the message, basically. Really important to feel the dimension. So you can do it. You don't have to produce anything, even though it has to have the right dimension. No, just put on goggles, use your iPad, use your iPhone. Obviously, another way would be to put these renderings or animations onto a big screen, right? Lots of different ways, but with, digital twin, once you have it, you're ready to go. You can do it, right? Don't need to, change your whole workflow at that point. You can obviously go into the web shops and so on. And this right here is a 3D print. That's a whole nother output format that you have, right? KeyShot Studio, we're partnered with Stratasys. Hopefully some of you know that company as well. Super high-end 3D printing company, nothing like what you think of when you think of like orange filament and like visible lines or something. No, they're real deal, right? So really expensive, I will say, but much cheaper than actually producing physical prototypes, much cheaper. And the idea is that you can print material in huge detail, right? So materials can be tactile, you can really feel that. Plus you can weigh these things. So here you actually have a little bonus on top of the AR and VR. You can feel the weight of an object, so you can really get close to having a factory-produced preview of what you're doing without having to undergo all of that investment in getting an actual prototype. Let's come back to variations. I picked up 137 variations in the color sample. Was that roughly correct? Yeah, 137 different colors to pick from. All of those need to undergo approval in some form, right? I mean, you can't just throw random options out there, so they need to be approved. Again, how would you do that without the real materials, without being able to produce 137 different cars that have the different paint jobs? I see some laughing. Maybe you had thrown some colors on there. Okay, fair enough. We won't mention that. But here I can just go through like an animation. How would you else do that, right? Show off the real materials in one smooth animation, switching between them, right? So you produce one item, you have one twin of a product, but it can incorporate all these different variations. I think that's super important. As a side note, AI is becoming big, and there's a whole topic in and of itself. I haven't included much here in the slides, but I'm really interested. I want to kind of lead you on to discuss with us at the booth, maybe in a bit more detail, right? We have a little bit more time, or at dinner. Let's talk about AI. We see AI, though, as not necessarily a competition to what we do, but as a supplement, as a big additional kind of bonus to this workflow. If you have a digital twin, you have the object as it is, as it needs to be. This is locked, right? You cannot, if you ever like generate images with AI, they'll produce cool stuff, but it won't be exactly what you're looking at. So we feel the power is in taking a digital twin, but then using AI to generate environments, to generate, a script for like a video, to basically generate a supplement, the real truth, with saving all of this time by generating, the context, so to speak, right? Can you do it with photos? Can you do it with something that isn't a digital twin? No, because then you would have to take photos, then you'd have to remove the background, and slot in AI. At that point, it just doesn't really make so much sense. With 3D and with a digital twin, you're ready to go, right? You can render it with a transparent background and submit it to whatever, AI generation you want, generative AI you want. So switching focus a little bit, this is KeyShot Studio, and I really think it's crucial to also highlight how easy it is to apply an AxF material in Studio. We did a little bit of research also before this event and found that this came up repeatedly as something that we think is really cool within our own software, if we're allowed to say that. Just simply going in, scrolling our material library to measured materials. These are actually, a couple that come with, I'll talk more about more materials, and simply dragging them on a object, right? In this case, obviously, as you can see, our helmet. And it's just being that simple to generate images is super powerful. Some new development, by the way, I had to put it in here. As a product manager, I am legally obliged to do that. We have new lighting tools, which we think is super cool. So here I'm literally just placing a spotlight by simply clicking on the helmet, and that's determining the highlight of the actual new light, which, by the way, really shows the complexity of this material, that it's not just a kind of standard red, plasticky material, but it actually has complexity in the way it interacts with light, right? And that does bring me to another important point. We make rendering software. Yes, we need to import CAD, which we are extremely good at. We support virtually any CAD application. We support AxF materials, which, as you can see, you can get them and grab them and just drop them on the different parts. That's super easy. But what else is there to make this whole vision work? It's the actual rendering, the core of what we do, right? Producing the images. That needs to be fantastic. We have 15 years of experience with rendering. We're industry leading. That's great. But I want to show you a new feature that we think is super important in showing how we push the boundaries within ray tracing and within 3D rendering. And this has to do with denoising. For those that are maybe not aware, denoising is basically a solution to the problem that when you produce and you ray trace an image, you will see noise that appears in the beginning. This is where the computer is essentially unsure of what the final pixel is going to be. So it's a bit noisy. And then as you wait, we call that basically the render time, right? It's resolving the image. The noise gets less and less, and eventually you'll say the noise is now basically invisible. This is good to go. If you've ever rendered an image in ray tracing, you will know this. So denoising is not a new thing. It came up a couple years ago through AI and neural networks that are basically trained on noise data and can then say, hey, you know what? Your image isn't done rendering yet. So there is noise, but I'm a filter, and I can basically be so smart that I can remove the noise for you in a second or less than a second. So imagine waiting 30 minutes for a rendering. You don't have to do that anymore, because after 2 minutes, you can basically stop the rendering. Yes, there's tons of noise, but then you can apply this filter, and within a second, the noise is magically gone. It sounds fantastic, sounds too good to be true, and unfortunately, back then it was a bit too good to be true, right? We talked to all of our customers and we found out with us, but actually with any other denoise implementation, there is the issue of overworking images. Denoising is a filter in the end, right? And so it's really smart with the AI to be able to find out how to remove all of that noise from images, but it would overwork images as well. So take a note, and yeah, this is really hard to see, especially if you're in the back, so trust me on this, but look at the slides afterwards. I hope we can distribute them, yeah. So in the red, we have a porous a rubber tire material, right? So that has noise. And this is what we see when you talk about flakes, when you talk about all of these microfacet details that you can have in complex materials that we're all so interested in capturing, right? You'll have naturally a lot of noise in those high frequency changes in the pixels, meaning that that is kind of, it looks like noise, but it's not really noise. It's what makes the material, right? Well, in the green rectangle, you have actual noise. This is a metal like rim or something in the sci-fi tire or a sci-fi wheel. And so what you can see here is actual noise. And traditionally, denoisers, there's open image denoise from Intel, for example. There's Optics has solutions for NVIDIA GPUs and so on. They were really smart, but they produced this outcome. Yes, the noise here is, I can use the laser pointer, the noise here is gone. That's beautiful, that's what we want. But look at what happened here. It completely destroyed the detail because it thought it was noise as well. So that wasn't good enough. Well, this is where we came in and we were like, it's the upside of having good denoising is too much to ignore. We need to do something about it. Really difficult to do something about it, but we actually hired some PhD students that were working on this, super smart people, and got them on board, and they got started and developed something called progressive denoising. And that is, they're so smart that I cannot at all explain how it works, right, first of all, unfortunately. But they wrote papers about it, so you can Google it. But they made a denoise algorithm, right, that we delivered late last year in KeyShot Studio 24.3, which is, as you can see, able to distinguish between intended noise, so to speak, and actual noise. So you can go back, cut down your render times dramatically, and with good conscience, enable that effect. And it won't destroy your details, but it will remove the noise. It's super, super cool. And our customers are saying the most amazing thing we've done in like core rendering in the last many years. So super proud of it. And I do see that connection, right? Again, the big picture. You have a digital twin, you have measured AxF materials, everything is great. Well, it's against the point if you spend a week rendering images because it was all to save time. It needs to be fast, it needs to be performant, especially in the design phase, because design, as you know, is creative work. And what kills creativity? Waiting around, right? Waiting a week for your results. That kills the juices, that kills the creative juices from flowing. So, really important stuff. Like everybody else, apparently, we are also working on a library, of course. This is what you're looking at is a preview of the cloud library. So KeyShot Studio comes with a bunch of pre-existing AxF files, but here you can see our approach at producing a public and shared library. You can see here we have worked together with Tiger, who are going to be our next speakers. Yes, I see Daniel down there. Who are super awesome and have helped us migrate their large, or I shouldn't say a small part of their large collection of AxF measured materials from Tiger Coatings. And those you could see, right? And it has all the latest flashy kind of features here. Super accessible, super easy to use. I was able to say I want a powder-coated finish. Of course, I could have also searched by Tiger, for example, as tags. I limited to whites, and I limited it to AxF as a tag down there, as a keyword, and that way I was able to break down thousands of materials into just the couple I want. Why is that important? Well, we have talked a lot about the technical side of things, but we haven't talked so much about the user experience here for those designers, right? I mean, it's super crucial to not just render these and have digital twins and have progressive denoising and so on. In the end, before any of that counts, you need to have a supportive and visual way of picking the right materials for you. Our plans with this, when we go live in summer of this year with this new cloud library for everybody, is actually to give partners like Tire Coatings their own access, essentially their own curation platform here, so that they can, if they go ahead and they make a new line, they make new products themselves, they can go in themselves and just curate them, right? Put them into playlists, have their own followers and so on. That's the idea, because we think, again, that that's going to help, make everybody a winner in this, right? Because those digital twins that use those paints, well, they will be produced for real. That's why they're being made. This is where you'll win. And for us, obviously, it helps greatly to facilitate the idea of, hey, if you want to have the most value as a business from 3D rendering, use those real materials, right? Don't just throw a plastic shader on it because it looks kind of like what you think it would look like. So that makes a ton of sense. Okay, in the last 2 minutes, I want to, I guess, talk about what the second half of the Porsche talk was about. From our perspective, and obviously much shorter. But it's so funny because, again, without knowing this at all, this is exactly the train of thought we had. Well, we have this industry-leading ray tracing renderer that helps people create all of these images. Now we've added progressive denoising, which means you can produce like 10 times the amount of pictures at great quality than before. Basically, we've given you a fantastic tool, and also a poison, almost a virus that can kill your entire business, because you're going to produce over 5,000, I really mean over 5,000 images easily as a single user of our product, right? And that's going to basically mean you're going to start accumulating all of these renderings, and you're going to run into, well, exactly the issues. I love that Explorer screenshot you had with like all of these files. Exactly, right? Like you basically just start thrashing some kind of network drive with all of this stuff, and it dies immediately, right? I mentioned in the beginning that product design especially, but also marketing, is not a straight line. You sometimes go in one direction and then you discover, oops, I needed to go that way, and then you go that way and you discover, no, I need to go back. What do you need for that? Version, I should probably go to the next slide. Version control, right? Super important. The ability to say nothing is lost. You can always go back to previous versions of files, no matter where you are, right? Even if you delete a file, it isn't actually deleted. It's just archived. So you can always bring back those files. Collaboration. You render these images as a product designer to get approval by the stakeholders, right? So what needs to be there as a platform to make this happen? Collaboration. I want to go in, and I can with the KeyShot Hub. I can go in and I can say, add Jens, my manager, can you give me a review on this, right? I can actually put the whole asset, the whole file into review mode. He'll get a notification about this, exactly what we saw, what you developed. Get a notification when he logs in the next day, gets a notification about 15 other products he needs to review, right? Can then prioritize which one to look at first, and again, work on feedback. This side-by-side viewing, exactly what we have in the Hub. So you can take two versions, two different products, two different variations of the same product, or two different versions, and you can slide back and forth. You can click on a part of an image and say, I want to comment on this part of the image, and then write a comment and tag somebody to look at that, right? All of these collaboration tools supplement the visual communication from the rendering with the textual, right? The tagging and the notifications that we expect from, basically we're in the Teams era, right? Well, all of this needs to somehow work. Right. I won't mention security, but obviously super important also to think of your security when you do all of this. Well, we came out with the KeyShot Hub last year. And we are dead set on of course, continuing and expanding the scope of this system. But it's really important that we don't just now deliver rendering, but we also we don't let you alone with all these images. We want to help you along with those images as well, right? Help you manage them, get the most out of them. Yes, that's 30 minutes. And that was a brief look at what we do, what we think, what we are working on, and what's coming in the future. So thank you very much.